community created here on Shaw TV. I'm your host, Marty Gold. We're going to be, in the first part of the show, recapping a number of stories that we've covered here with some new information, some perspectives from viewers, some information surprisingly provided by the provincial government, and as well, not one, but two, a double header of Focal Point Optician Moments of Vision. I want to open the program firstly by making note of the passing of a longtime fixture in the Winnipeg community, Bob Jones. As Bob Jones, he was a director of the Parks and Recreation Department in the City of Winnipeg back in the old days, the Board of Commissioners days, and he also hosted a program on community TV, Seniors on the Move. Now, Bob Jones was one side of the man. The other side was Bobby Jones, the bald, it's called a butcher when you have the double shoulder strap tunic, all in black. He was a longtime, how do we put this? Enhancement talent is the modern phrase. But Bob would go in as a villainous sort of cheating, do things behind the referee's back, professional wrestler, was seen many, many times on AWA TV, on the old Channel 12. And, there's so many greats that came through Winnipeg, especially early in their careers, like Jimmy Snuka, Ken Patera, the Olympian, Greg Gagne early in his career, and Bobby Jones, he laid down and counted the lights for all of them one way or the other, as well as on the local circuit working for many years, in particular starting in the Madison Club, going on, I think it was called the Crescent Club, and wrestling for many years as well with Tony Condello in the WFWA. And Bob was a longtime tag team champion at various levels. His sons got into the pro wrestling business as well. I had the pleasure of meeting him once or twice, and for the kind of gruff, mean, cheating, nasty character, the old ugly bald guy, Bob Jones is one of the nicest people around and so dedicated to this community. And I wanted to make sure to note his years of service in the Parks and Recreation Department, as well as the fact that he was, in fact, the man who had his hand raised. Very first live professional wrestling match I ever watched, the Winnipeg Auditorium, Bob Jones was the winner over Orest Antonishin. I can't find my car keys, but I can remember every result of every match on that wrestling card in 1968. We're, as I said, going to recap some matters that have been covered on this program. I'll grab a green marker and go over to Cash Cow returning, Ab the Octopus, having been the presenter last week. You remember the story that we did about the tweets telling the tale of horrors from the Seven Oaks General Hospital, misbehavior on Twitter. Lisa having an update that she put out, a grandma recap. She was left to wait 4.5 hours in the Seven Oaks General Hospital. There's that hashtag for people with bad experiences they wanted to share, Winnipeg ER, with a doctor's note. She went to the hospital, doctor's note, and suspicion of a stroke. No treatment. The MRI confirmed a stroke in the brainstem, though their lack of attention could have had devastating effects. Now, you'll remember that part of the story wasn't just that her Baba is sitting there waiting with a doctor's note, and she didn't reveal in her initial series of tweets what the suspicion was, why the doctor had sent Baba to the Seven Oaks emergency room. But you'll remember that among the things that she tweeted about, the guy with the drunken guy with the head wound bothering people, the fact that Lisa tried to get assistance for a woman who was vomiting on the floor in extraordinary, excruciating pain for hours. Well, that subject came up. Jody Moskal asking, when you saw the same woman this week, did you ask her what she'd been diagnosed with? Now, Lisa saying, well, I did. She told me she had an infection in her dialysis line. What was it with Brian Sinclair? Wasn't that an infection in a stent, right? Something like that? Mm-hmm. Jody going, holy smokes, is she okay? I can't believe she was ignored. Lisa responding, including CBC Manitoba in these tweets, she looked much better. She said she was really sick, was aware many people tried to help her. And what did we see last week? The government announcing, we're going to be implementing the recommendations for the Brian Sinclair inquest. We see how well that's worked so far. Triage nurses, you'll recall when Lisa said, this woman's throwing up on the floor and creating a scene and obviously needs help. And the triage nurse acted like, look, it's going to be her break in 2 minutes or something. Leave me alone. Now, the first of two Focal Point Optician Moments of Vision. Last week's story, or 2 weeks ago rather, story about the companion that week to the Seven Oaks General Hospital emergency rooms horrors. was how the government officials in court suffering from amnesia. Anytime a whistleblower showed up to confirm the story of another whistleblower. Leonard Kaplan providing this, and here's actually from our blog post, whistleblower complaint backed up in lawsuit testimony after NDP bureaucrat catches amnesia. Len Kaplan, this topic is so deep you would need an MBA to understand what's happening here. The overall corruption at all levels of government is bleeding out the city and province. My compliments to you. This was a Facebook post for bringing this forward. Let's go a little deeper. That story involving an organization that was known as BCC, Biomedical Commercialization Canada, now known as the Manitoba Technology Accelerator. And lo and behold, last week, after the public became aware that this organization may not have been doing its job properly compared to what the government says its job is, all of a sudden Kevin Chief can't wait to hop on his Gestetner and pump out some press releases talking about how great the Technology Accelerator helps support development of cutting-edge companies. While good ideas can come from anywhere, says Kevin Chief, we know the ideas that come from Manitoba succeed because the unmatched support organizations, and that question mark was in the government press release, by the way, so I left it in, like the Manitoba Technology Accelerator provide to get ideas off the ground. Government putting in an additional $600,000 over 2 years. The not-for-profit Manitoba Technology Accelerator is dedicated to helping technology startups with support, such as business mentoring, coaching, networking, and investment. Remember, the complaint in court that was being probed by the lawyer for the plaintiff, the lawyer being Gene Zazelenchuk, of official from that was with this organization that is with the succeeding organization, was about what happens when somebody says they aren't getting the supports that the government says they're paying for. Chief went on, this program helps, Chief didn't, this was a quote from another official, this program helps entrepreneurs secure the services and support they need to grow from a smart idea to an active business, said Marshall Ring. His name's come up in testimony that we have talked about. He's the Chief Executive Officer of MTA. This funding is a powerful driver. So you see, it's very important. The government counts on it. This is the kind of technology that creates high-end jobs. This isn't call centers we're talking about. There's Marshall Ring, whose name came up in the legislature when John Gerard asked about him and whether there was a conflict of interest and how was he supposed to report on the activities of BCC and of the MTA. And Teresa Oswald, the minister at the time, before Chief, she had no idea what he was even talking about, even though there was a court case going on. In the past year, the program providing support to 9 companies. The MTA charges clients using a convertible debt note, which means clients pay for services after their company achieves financial success. Now, the case that we showed you the testimony from Examination for Discovery was where somebody said, we're not getting our services. And what happens when somebody blew the whistle? Well, government official Doug McCartney had amnesia, couldn't remember Lee Dirksen coming forward and saying, I'm not getting the services and what's going on here. And then was told repeatedly by the government lawyer, by the Crown Counsel, don't answer that. When another witness was brought into the process and examination, Mr. Grushi, who confirmed that he had the same concerns and did not like how Mr. Dirksen was being treated, the plaintiff in that lawsuit. When Zazelenchuk tried to probe McCartney, well, what about when the second whistleblower came forward? Do you remember now? Don't answer that. Don't answer that. Now you see that your government is pumping another $600,000 in. Marshall Ring was one of the people whose name has come up in the court testimony. He's still there. There seems to be evidence that people who say we're not getting the services the government's paying for, that they went to the government department and complained about it. And it appears that instead of the complaints that your tax dollars aren't going to where it's supposed to be going, being taken seriously, instead it appears that the whistleblowers were treated with contempt. So maybe there's two sides of the equation Kevin Chief has to look at. Sure, there's some success stories, absolutely. But going back to 2007, 8, 9, there might have been some people stepped on. And the government should expect better from their officials than have a situation where the lawyer's saying, don't answer that. Don't answer questions about what the whistleblowers told you. Why are you pumping more money into an organization that is facing these kinds of questions in a substantial lawsuit? Well, because if you're going to have a by-election in the PAW, you got to get out all the press releases you can. Time now for our second focal point opposition moment of vision. No, highly irregular, but pleasant surprise, I must say. A tweet on March 19th from Councillor Brian Mays. The word rapid has been reinstated in the budget at EPC regarding the transitway, my Marty Gold amendment, because it had been noted that it was, I think David Saunders noted, the word rapid was no longer there. And I wish I could say that I could come up with some amendment one day that I'll name after Brian Mays, but I can't think of it yet. But I appreciate Councillor Mays at least making the effort to reassure us that the verbiage of rapid remains, even though the reality of whether the dog leg through Parker Lands is going to be rapid or not remains to be seen. A little more from City Hall as we wrap up this opening segment. Mayor Bowman, with some desperation last week, in trying to get the heat off when it came to frontage levies, the heat being put on by, among others, Councillor Ross Eady, about how this is, if you're going to campaign that taxes are going to be held to the rate of inflation, when you start, as you saw, with this budget, basically the way it rolled out was the total amount that what you're paying goes up, or whether you define it as a tax or a fee or a levy or whatever, was actually 7%. So Bowman, using his Twitter account to go on the offensive, frontage levies encourage density and don't penalize owners for increasing the value of the property. Frontage levies are a flat rate per foot and are more progressive than property taxes. If any of you heard Brian Bowman campaign in favor of frontage levies and increasing them and how that they're more fair, and just let me know. Another tweet, the frontage levies are dedicated fund for local street repairs based on length of property frontage adjacent to municipal infrastructure. And yet at the same time, one of the things that was being cut out of the budget was curb repair. So you tell me, the frontage fee is supposedly fair because it's the same amount per foot whether you live on Bauer Boulevard, not picking of the good people on the good people of Tuxedo here, just using an example. It's the same whether you live on Bauer Boulevard or whether you live on Grosvenor or live on Alloway, as it is if you live on Cathedral or Church or up in Shaughnessy Heights or on Scotia. Now, how true do you think it is that this is equal when the curb repairs in front of the house of the North End aren't done because it's cut out of the budget, but they're still paying for these repairs? Nobody really buys the idea that it's equitable, even if it's the same fee. Anyways, Matt Allard, councillor from St. Boniface, retweeting Kristen Annable of The Sun with regards to Councillor Morantz making a comment. They inherited the budget process. More collaboration will happen next year. Well, among the issues that Allard was pushing, the Marion Street improvements of the budget meeting, accusing Bowman and the EPC of playing politics. This report from Aldo Santino of the Free Press. Matt saying he was never consulted when EPC removed Marion Street from this year's list of capital projects. Now, Morantz explaining that this won't go forward without additional funding from Ottawa and the province. The $5.2 million that had been set aside this year for Marion was moved into the general fund for 4 projects the city hopes to secure matching funds for. Marion's one of the 4 projects, but there's no guarantee that it's going to get funded. So, try to understand this, please, because I don't. The money's set aside, but now it's put in the general fund for all the projects so that if Marion doesn't get approved, the $5 million can be reallocated to the 3 that do, I guess. Allard saying the behind-the-scene moves was a betrayal of the, quote, new era of collaboration that Bowman said had been ushered into City Hall with his election victory. Now, Morantz said City Hall needs to develop a better way to prepare its budgets, but until that happens, the work is the responsibility of EPC members. The model we have is the one we inherited, is EPC makes the budget and brings it to council. If there are ways to improve it, I'm willing to listen. Now, watch how a reporter will hear something and have a different interpretation of what the words really mean. What Morantz said was, we're stuck with this. We have to do it this way because it's the way it's done. And I'd be willing to listen to ideas to improve it for next year. By the time the reporter from The Sun interprets it for Twitter, and granted, you're limited to 140 characters, Morantz says they inherited this budget process and more collaboration will happen next year. Although I'm sure that's what Marty wants to do, that's not exactly what he said. The conclusion you can draw is that Mayor Bowman was elected on the basis of being an agent for change, but change later. Lastly, before the morning break, Councillor Jabassi had lobbied for $9 million for separated bike lanes, saying that would have a dramatic impact on downtown commuter traffic. Stop laughing. Is that your priority, $9 million for bike lanes downtown when you can't even get your curbs fixed in front of your home? I didn't think so. When we come back, we're going to take a look at the budget and other fiascos slowly unfolding in the Winnipeg and other school divisions. And remember we talked about funding for special needs kids? We raised that issue that the NDP Deputy Minister had not been entirely truthful with the reporter from the Winnipeg Free Press, and a lot of what we're about to go into in the next segment is a follow-up, again, of what was covered here on City Circus. We'll be back with more right after. Come back to City Circus, and of course that recap, I should have mentioned that our guest from the previous episode, the interview I did with Dave Shore, Manitoba Forward, available on citycircus.ca, is our all the most recent past episodes of this program. In fact, an editorial that week as it ran, op-ed piece in the Winnipeg Sun, written by Graham Lane, asking many of the questions we ask on this program. What about the rest of us that aren't in the provincial government's good book, so to speak? But then again, if only we had the opportunity to just flip a coin and, decide who was going to actually run things around here, right? Winnipeg and other school divisions. Want to take a look very quickly. I'm going to have to bomb through a lot of material here. This story from Nick Martin, very busy guy for a guy who's so busy being nominated for awards for his reporting. Tax hike for special needs students, says the headline. School division, Winnipeg School Division, boost rate 3.2% as parents seek more help. Now, the meaning of that headline to the average person, and Nick Martin didn't write the headline. I want to be clear on that. Headlines are written by somebody else in the newspaper process. The headline is very clear that the tax hike is to help particular group of kids, right? Not by the time you're done with the numbers. It's an extraordinary decision. School division, Winnipeg School Division, will raise school taxes to provide help for 100 special needs students who don't meet provincial standards. We're only seeing 70% of our level 2 applications being approved. Remember, when Nick Martin wrote the story where he interviewed Gerald Farthing, the Deputy Minister of Education, he didn't get those facts. We brought those forward from scanning Twitter, from emails we received, from comments that we get from viewers, and we put that part of the story together. That this wasn't that there was so much help being given to kids in the community and ahead of time, that this was early intervention. This wasn't a success on that basis. You see that, in fact, the applications were not being approved. We're dealing with parents' anxiety, said Rollins. The week began with parents of special needs kids pleading for more help. Minister Bjornson insists the province has not changed special needs funding. There are fewer children needing help. But he said he's listened to parents, and we'll talk to school divisions. I have concerns with the application process. Well, that certainly contradicts what his deputy minister said, doesn't it? Now, the school division didn't stop with just those 100 kids for the level 2 funding. They approved a series of measures, more education assistance, established an anxiety program, support for high school fetal alcohol spectrum disorder programs, and junior high autism spectrum disorder programs. Bjornson emphasized the issue is how many students receive help, not how much money the province makes available. Oh, really? We have not cut special needs funding. There's no cap on special needs funding. Now, this is an example of a politician talking out of both sides of his mouth. Because in River East, Transcona School Division official telling the Free Press, we're submitting the same number of applications or more, but the number of applications being approved is decreasing. From Brandon, Mark Sefton, the school board chairman, saying we see a steady decline in approvals for funding. At the same time, we are seeing steady enrollment increases. But it's not about the money, says Bjornson. Now, of course, somebody's got to come out and defend the government, and who better than Brian O'Leary? And just Google the term O'Leary Gate to see what his involvement was many years ago with the mysterious acquisition of land for a school that wasn't approved yet. Brian O'Leary, longtime NDP official, is the Seven Oaks superintendent. He's seen a drop of how many students are funded, but believes the province is justified. There's probably a stricter interpretation of the level 2 criterion there's been in the past. There are many children who need additional help, who don't meet the criteria of being disabled. Now, the Tory education critic Wayne Owasco, who worked as a teacher, said Bjornson is totally incorrect on the number of students who need funding. It's absolutely capped. Somebody in the system is blocking the application forms. It's brutal. And then Ann Cresta, a consultant with Education Solutions Manitoba, it's a decrease for kids qualifying for level 2. The criteria haven't changed, but they're being approved more stringently, and parents don't want to be caught between the province and the division. Again, this, when it first came up in the Free Press, in Nick Martin's first story about this, wasn't a problem at all. And now all of a sudden it turns out it was a problem. And the minister had to talk out of both sides of his mouth. So we issued a tweet about this within weeks of City Circus exposing how the NDP was fibbing to Nick Martin about special needs funding needs. There was his story. And Andrea Villeneuve tweeting to us, not impressed with the spin. Those not in the know will blame the special needs kids for the tax increase. The tax increase pays for more than special needs programming. Well, more from Twitter, David Lobson, saying this doesn't add up to a 3.2% increase for special needs and special ed. With a link to the trustees' budget process and reports from this Winnipeg School Division. It isn't the special needs children that caused the increase. I did, as I say, my Fay Hotchman grade 12 math, and I added up those 4 programs that they talked about that they've added, okay, and they added it up to $1,055,500. So what does that translate to into tax? Lobson saying new spending is $2.4 million. And so I've tried to do some basic math. I could be wrong. I stand to be corrected. I know school trustees watch this program. The tax hike for special needs kids, the headline said the tax hike was for them. Well, the actual tax hike for them is that figure again, $1 million and change. The tax rate going up 3.2% is $2.4 million, which means $1.3 million, $1,361,800 was not being spent on special needs kids. But the headline said the tax increase was because of them. Great reporting. Now more reporting from Nick Martin, from his blog. And it's amazing how the story progresses. A couple days after that one, he puts a blog post up. The school division, seemingly deciding out of nowhere, will ditch one of its 5 senior managers. The plan to cut a superintendent's job. None of them intend to retire. Of course, that's not out of the blue. It's try to control the damn budget, but right over his head, I guess. That would leave 1 assistant superintendent for every 11,000 students. The ratio elsewhere in the city is 3,500 to 4,000 students. That deserves a story in and of itself, because either those other school divisions have too many, or the Winnipeg School Division, in trying to balance their budget, is playing with fire. Martin going on to say he's told the budget only passed 6-3, and there was a motion that lost by a 7-2 vote to cut the 3.2% increase down to 2.4. Let me translate that to English. I am told there's a budget committee that has a budget chair, who I guess the finance chair is Sherry Rollins, I think, and then 2 other members. And apparently this 3.2 budget didn't even pass. Didn't even pass the committee. The committee members, some of them, by the way, are NDP trustees, they couldn't stomach the tax hike. Now, watch the clue here. Nick Martin says the final budget decisions were reached behind closed doors, and tonight's agenda, when it did go online, is almost totally bereft of details. Pointing out, remember the new era of openness and transparency when trustees were raving about in November. So this was taken out of the hands of the budget committee from the looks of it. Closed door meetings of the committee of a whole, all the trustees, and a proposal to keep, for parents and taxpayers, the school division, Winnipeg School Division, keep taxes down, failed. Well, the next thing that came up was about religious instruction. Trustees rejecting a petition form used for years for parents who want their kids to get religious instruction in the school system. They've rejected Bible studies at Greenway School. Mike Babinski, Monday night, accused trustees of setting up every roadblock possible to thwart religion in division schools. Fellow trustees are trying to, he said, find ways to oust these kinds of people from the schools. Now, trustee Lisa Naylor decides to open up about this. She said the group, the only one that used the Public Schools Act to conduct religious instructions in division schools, holds beliefs, quote, that do not support gay and lesbian families, transgender people. How do we allow discussion to go on in our schools that goes against our own values? Our own values. Lisa Naylor talking actually about her own values. Trustee Kathy Collins, she was, by the way, one of the dissenters, as I understand it, on the Finance Committee and opposed this budget increase. She warned the board is in contempt of the Public Schools Act. Very volatile. Nick Martin writing a story that ended up on the front page of the Free Press last week. Trustee opposed to legal right. Lisa Naylor is challenging the legal right of evangelists. Oh, so it's not religion, it's evangelists. She wants other trustees to vote to demand the province amend legislation that allows Child Evangelism Fellowship Manitoba to conduct prayers and Bible studies for kids, for parents who provide consent. She wants shall, in the legislation, change to may, to let trustees decide who can preach. I wouldn't support any religious activities in schools. Good. All of you who live in Lisa Naylor's ward should phone her and challenge her. That means, therefore, that there should be no smudging ceremonies in schools, because smudging ceremonies and other Aboriginal practices that are being brought in as part of tolerance and encouragement of multiculturalism. In fact, that is based on Aboriginal spirituality, which would be to most people considered religious. Let's see if she opposes that as well. I will not support an organization who comes into public schools who has a record of donating money to anti-LGBTQ organizations and is associated with the teaching of creationism. Oh, so this isn't what they're doing on the school grounds now that's the issue. The issue is what their beliefs are that might be taught in the churches outside of school. Slippery slope. Naylor planning to table a motion, I want school divisions to have latitude. We're not going to be mandated to have religion in our schools. This failed in part because Dean Koshelanek, who's been on this program, was the first board member in memory to take the time to read the actual petition, alerted the board that the petition was significantly deficient in detail. Babinski, this recounting, Babinski accused the board of putting up roadblocks, and Naylor accused the CEF of opposing gay, lesbian, and transgender rights. The education director, Brent Hansen, said Bible studies with kids never address any of these issues. Our organization is designed to share with children the gospel of Jesus Christ. Provincial legislation allows parents the right to have their kids participate in religious instruction in schools. The spokesperson, Hansen, saying that the division is making demands go far beyond what's required of any other outside groups going into the school. The requirement both parents must sign, and both must read the entire year's Bible studies curriculum before signing. Naylor said she supports people's right to practice religion. I applaud the study of world religions, the role of various religions in history, social justice, colonialism, war. In other words, all the things she considers bad and the disadvantages people has created, the disadvantages in our community and communities, I guess, worldwide, right? It's okay to teach that, but to teach the tenets of the faith in lunch hour, as provided for in the Public Schools Act, she doesn't approve of. I do not support outside organizations coming to our children's public schools, even at lunch hour or after classes. It's the parents' public schools. And this is a very slippery slope. I am, as a matter of fact, tempted to go down to the school board and appear when this matter gets put before them, because this is not what she campaigned on. It's not what we expect from our school trustees to deal with. Next week, special guest right here in the studio, the man who never missed a dinner, Russ Wyatt, will be joining me here. Councillor Wyatt, talk about the budget. And until then, remember, you have the power.